All right, so ready to dive into some ethically tricky waters.
Always up for a deep dive, especially when it comes to ethics.
We're looking at Chapter 12 this time, right? The one about speaking up, raising those ethical red flags.
Yeah, speaking up skillfully, that's the title. I thought it was a really important one because, we can talk all day about the guidelines, but actually putting them into practice, that's where things get real.
Totally. It's like having the ingredients for a cake, but needing the actual recipe,
Yeah.
So how does this chapter help us bake that ethical cake? What's the game plan?
Well, it really emphasizes the importance of communication, but like doing it skillfully, not just, dropping an ethics bomb on everyone. It's about navigating those gray areas that pop up all the time in our field.
Right, because let's be real, not everything is black and white in behavior analysis.
Exactly. Like, remember that example with the behavior analyst who received that rather generous gift?
Oh, yeah, the one with the TV, right.
Yeah.
That was wild.
Yeah, so she's working with this family, making great progress with their daughter, and the father, super grateful, decides to gift her, get this, a $5,000 TV.
Talk about a thank you present, but also kind of a big ethical dilemma.
Huge. Like, what do you even do in that situation? Thankfully, she knew the guidelines inside and out and was able to gracefully sidestep that ethical landmine. She acknowledged the father's gratitude, but firmly explained that accepting such a lavish gift would be crossing a professional boundary.
It's all about finding that balance, right? Appreciating the gesture, but also setting those professional limits.
Exactly. And you know what the chapter said really worked in her favor? Her approach actually helped maintain that positive relationship with the family.
Which is so key, right? You don't want to damage those relationships by being overly harsh or confrontational.
Right. It's about being an ethical advocate, not an adversary.
Okay, but what about those times when you're put on the spot and you need a minute to think things through, like you don't have the answer right away? I feel like that happens to me all the time.
Totally. It's like that example in the chapter, the BCBA, who is still working on her master's, doing home consultations on the side. A parent asked for weekend sessions, which on the surface seems reasonable.
Yeah, totally. Weekends work for a lot of families. What was the conflict there?
So for this behavior analyst, weekends were for studying, meeting with her study group, all that crucial stuff for her own professional development, right?
Ah, I see. So agreeing to weekend sessions could have been detrimental to her studies and possibly even led to burnout.
Exactly. And that's where the idea of buying time comes in.
Such a good strategy. Sometimes you just need a beat before responding.
For sure. Like, even just saying, let me double check my schedule and get back to you, can give you the breathing room you need to process, maybe consult with a supervisor, or dust off those ethical guidelines.
Simple but effective. I'm writing that one down. But shifting gears a bit, what about those times when you suspect something more serious is going on? Like maybe some data fudging is happening.
Ah, yes. The chapter had a great example of that. Remember Melvin?
Melvin?
Yeah, he was the BCBA working with Lil Cooper.
Oh, right. Wasn't Cooper's mom supposed to be tracking his tantrums or something?
Yeah, tantrums, hitting, some other behaviors. And Melvin starts noticing the data is, well, too perfect. Like, almost like Cooper was an angel child who never had a challenging moment.
And that's a red flag.
Major red flag. But accusing a parent of falsifying data is like walking on eggshells. Right.
Feel delicate.
The chapter really stressed the importance of treading carefully in those situations. You don't want to just launch into accusations and jeopardize that therapeutic relationship.
Right, that defeats the whole purpose.
Exactly. So instead of confronting the mom directly, Melvin focuses on building rapport. Just casual chats about her day, finding those little points of connection,
Building that bridge of trust before diving into the tougher stuff. Did it work?
It did. After he'd established that foundation of trust, he gently steered the conversation toward Cooper's behavior, asking open-ended questions like, how are you feeling about taking data? Or, can you tell me a little bit about what's been happening?
Giving her the space to explain without feeling attacked? Smart.
Exactly. And as it turns out, she wasn't intentionally trying to deceive anyone. She was just feeling overwhelmed, struggling to keep up with the data collection.
Which, let's be honest, is completely relatable. Parenting is no joke.
Totally. So, Melvin used this as a chance to reinforce the importance of accurate data collection, not by scolding, but by connecting it back to how it directly impacts Cooper's treatment plan.
Turning a potential conflict into a learning opportunity. Love that. Okay, but what about ethical situations with those in a position of authority, like a supervisor? That feels way more intimidating.
Oh, definitely. That can be tricky territory.
The story of Wendy and the administrator comes to mind. That one felt intense.
Yeah, so Wendy, she's a brand new BCBA, Excited at this new job at a residential facility, thinks it's her dream gig, and then bam, the administrator hits her with this out-of-the-blue request.
Okay, what happened? What was the request?
So, seems like a big review team is about to descend on the facility, the kind that scrutinizes everything, client files, data, the works.
Intense.
And the administrator asks Wendy to tidy things up a bit.
Tidy things up. That sounds a little vague.
Yeah, and super shady, because tidying things up actually meant creating missing assessments. We're talking about fabricating data for clients she hadn't even met yet.
Oh, wow. That's not tidying up. That's a major ethical violation.
Tell me about it. And imagine the pressure, right? New job, trying to impress the boss.
Talk about being caught in a tough spot. What did the chapter say about dealing with those situations, especially with a supervisor? It's not like you can just, tell them off.
No, definitely not. But it stressed the importance of standing your ground, ethically speaking, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's your supervisor putting on the pressure.
Easier said than done, though, right?
Totally. It would have been easy for Wendy to just freeze up or cave under the pressure, but she didn't. She took a breath and chose the ethical path.
How'd she handle it? Give us the breakdown.
Okay, so she stays calm, cool, and collected. She doesn't get defensive or argumentative, but she makes it clear that fabricating assessments is a no-go.
Did she just flat out refuse?
She was actually very strategic about it. She started by making sure she understood exactly what the administrator was asking. Just to be absolutely certain there wasn't another way to interpret the request.
Got to clarify those expectations.
For sure. And once it was clear that, yeah, she was being asked to falsify documents, she pushed back, but in a way that was firm but respectful.
That's such a tricky balance to strike. What did she actually say?
She basically said, look, I get it. You want everything to be perfect for the review team. But creating these assessments for clients I haven't even met, that goes against my ethical code. And frankly, it could even lead to bigger problems down the road.
Highlighting those potential consequences, good strategy. Did she just leave it at that, or did she actually offer any solutions?
Oh, she came prepared. Wendy proposed that they schedule actual assessments for these clients, making sure everything was documented properly.
Okay, so she's not just shooting down the bad idea, she's offering a good alternative.
Exactly. And she emphasized that doing things by the book would give the review team real, accurate data, and more importantly, ensure that the clients were actually getting what they needed.
It's about doing what's right for the clients in the end, which is what our ethical guidelines are all about, right? But let's shift gears a bit. We've talked about clients and supervisors. What about ethical challenges that come up when you're collaborating with professionals from other disciplines? They might not be looking at things through a behavior analytic lens.
Definitely a recipe for some interesting conversations.
For sure. The chapter had a good example about that, right? With Ian.
Oh, yeah. Ian and little Cassie.
Right, Cassie. And there was an occupational therapist involved too, wasn't there? Debbie, I think her name was.
You've got a great memory. Yeah, so Ian's working with Cassie, who has autism, as part of this multidisciplinary team. Debbie, the OT, is really into sensory integration therapy. She's convinced that a sensory-rich environment is the answer to all of Cassie's challenges. Her tantrums, her difficulty sitting still, focusing during sessions.
And Ian had a different perspective, I'm guessing.
Big time. From a behavior analytics standpoint, those tantrums, they're not just sensory-seeking behavior, they're communication.
Yeah.
He's thinking functional analysis, trying to figure out what's driving those behaviors.
For those who are new to behavior analysis and might not be familiar, can you give us a quick rundown of what a functional analysis is?
Sure. Basically, it's a way to understand why a behavior is happening. Like, what's the function? What's causing it? By understanding the why, we can create much more effective interventions.
Makes sense. So you have Debbie with the sensory approach and Ian advocating for a functional analysis. How do you even begin to navigate those different opinions?
That's where that think before you speak advice from the chapter comes in handy.
Love that advice.
Right. It's about being both respectful and assertive.
Like walking a tightrope.
Totally. And that's exactly how Ian approached it. He didn't dismiss Debbie's perspective. Sensory activities could be beneficial for Cassie in other ways. But he also advocated for a behavior analytic approach.
Finding that common ground so important in those collaborations. How did he phrase it?
He said something like, I agree with Debbie. Cassie has some motor challenges that might really benefit from those OT exercises to improve her balance and coordination. However, I'm also seeing some behavioral concerns, like those tantrums, that might need a different approach, like a functional analysis to really understand what's going on.
He's acknowledging her expertise while also advocating for his own. Did he explain why he felt so strongly about the functional analysis?
He did. He emphasized that ethically, as a behavior analyst, he has to use evidence-based practices. And when it comes to behaviors, functional analysis is the gold standard. It helps you understand why the behavior is occurring, which is crucial for creating an effective treatment plan.
And it's all about advocating for what's best for the client, even if it leads to a little professional disagreement. Love these examples.
There are even more. And they highlight that sometimes those tough ethical conversations, you have to have them within our own field with other behavior analysts.
Oh, right. Like the example with Matt.
Yeah, Matt and Dr. X. That one was interesting. So Matt hears these rumors about a colleague, Dr. X, and they're not good.
What kind of rumors?
Well, people are saying she might be billing for sessions she's not actually conducting.
Yikes. That's a serious accusation, not to mention a huge ethical violation.
Absolutely. And it would have been easy for Matt to just ignore it, pretend he didn't hear anything, right?
Oh, yeah, I can see that. It's easier to just avoid the conflict altogether.
But the chapter emphasized how important it is to address these situations head on, even when it involves a colleague. Maintaining the integrity of our field, sometimes it means having those uncomfortable conversations.
It takes guts to speak up, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So how did Matt approach Dr. X about this? That's a potential minefield right there.
He played it smart. Instead of being confrontational, he reached out to her in a spirit of, like collegial concern. He reminded her that they had a long-standing relationship, saying something like, hey, we've known each other for a while now, and I wanted to touch base about something I've been hearing.
Okay, so kind of easing into it, not leading with the accusation.
Right, and then he said something like, I've heard that you've been billing for services without actually seeing clients, and I wanted to get your take on that.
Giving her the chance to clarify before things escalate. Did it work? How did she respond?
Well, as it turned out, the rumors were true. Dr. X admitted that she'd been feeling overwhelmed by her caseload and had started to cut corners. She was relying on reports from her staff to create treatment plans and billing for services she hadn't personally provided.
It sounds like a classic case of burnout leading to some serious ethical breaches. Important reminder for all of us to prioritize self-care and seek support when we're feeling the pressure, right?
100%. But back to Matt, how did he handle her admission?
Yeah, what do you do with that? It's a tough situation.
He stuck to that empathetic approach. He didn't condone her actions, but he made sure she knew he understood the pressure she was under. He also reminded her of the serious ethical implications, potential consequences for her career, that sort of thing.
It's about accountability, not judgment, right? But also about offering support. Did he have any suggestions for Dr. X, ways she could maybe rectify the situation?
He did. He suggested that she consider hiring another BCBA or two to help her manage the caseload ethically.
So she's not spread so thin and tempted to compromise her ethics.
Exactly. He really emphasized that this was about ensuring the clients were getting high-quality, ethical care.
It all comes back to that, doesn't it? Ethical behavior, client care, professional responsibility, it's all connected. And wow, we have covered some serious ground today.
We have. From clients to supervisors to colleagues, this chapter really highlighted how complex ethical decision-making can be in our field. It's not always easy to know what to do.
It's so much more than just knowing those guidelines, right? It's about applying them in real-world situations that are often messy and complicated.
100%. It takes communication skills, ethical courage, and real commitment to do what's right, especially when it's difficult.
And sometimes it even means speaking up to our own colleagues.
Right, and creating that culture where these kinds of discussions are encouraged, not avoided. Like, can you imagine if Matt hadn't said anything? Who knows how long those unethical practices might have continued?
It's a good reminder that we all have a responsibility to speak up when we see something that's not right. And that's actually a perfect segue to that thought-provoking question the chapter left us with. How can you cultivate a space where these ethical dilemmas are addressed openly and constructively?
Ooh, such a good question.
Yeah.
And it's not just for supervisors or seasoned BCBAs. It's for all of us, no matter where we are in our careers.
We can all strive to be those ethical leaders, to create environments where these important conversations are the norm. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive into the ethically fascinating and sometimes very tricky world of behavior analysis.
I agree. Until next time, everyone.
And remember, keep those ethical compasses handy.